Well, here in Southern Alberta, we love and enjoy the wilderness around us. We are so blessed to have such a variety. And to talk about these wonderful natural areas, we're joined by Lindsey, Wallis, and Devon Earl of Alberta Wilderness Association. Lindsey and Devon, welcome. Great to have you on today.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Okay, so first off, give us the history and the purpose of the Alberta Wilderness Association. I'm not sure which one of you wants to take. I believe, Devon, you're the conservation specialist. Lindsey, you're the event specialist. So yeah, whoever wants to talk a little bit about the history and the purpose of the organization.
Yeah, so way back in 1965, there were a group of backcountry enthusiasts who were really concerned about what they saw cumulative effects. So lots of different uses on the landscape. And it was degrading these places that they loved to go out and be in. So they all got together, and a few years later, the Alberta Wilderness Association was formed. Has always been a volunteer board, and they've always worked to sort of bring attention to these beautiful wild spaces and to educate other people about why they're really important and to try and get protection for them. And so, more than half a century later, that's still what we're here trying to do.
Yeah, well, it is a very beautiful province. For anyone who has not been here, definitely you need to come to Alberta. And your organization's website seems to be a treasure trove of old books about Alberta's wild and natural areas. Like you said, it started back in the 60s. So, there seemed to be a lot of documentation about the animals and activities in those areas. So is this still the same focus today, or has the focus changed over the last 50 years?
Yeah, we still have the same focus. Our motto is that we're defending wild Alberta through awareness and action. So we want to educate people about sort of the issues that are facing our wild spaces and encourage them to action. And our library is really special and kind of a huge part of that. We have documents in our paper library going back to sort of those beginning times and lots of things through the 70s and 80s, and documents and reports that aren't available anywhere else. And now, sort of as we've moved into a more digital age, we are still keeping a library, but it's much smaller now because it can be digital. But we still have that ability for people who are interested in these things to come in and use both of our libraries to do research.
That's so cool. So, we're talking about past activities. So what are some of the historical events that could mark the work of the Alberta Wilderness Association?
Yeah, so we've been involved in so many different things, and there's a lot of sort of areas of concern that we have throughout the province. Some of our really big wins are back in the 70s. They went to a bunch of landowners and the public and created a report about the Eastern Slopes. And we've heard a lot about the Eastern Slopes recently in terms of coal mining, and AWA was instrumental. They got the government to put in a policy back in the 70s to protect the Eastern Slopes. And so a lot of the protected areas that are there now, that's one of our legacies. And that coal policy that was recently rescinded, that everybody stood up and said, we don't want coal mining in our Eastern Slopes. AWA was also involved way back when that was put in with the government. And some of these special areas in our province, there's the Milk River Natural Area, Kennedy Coulee, Castle Wildland Park, even Kananaskis. AWA has been part of making sure that those places are protected so that generations to come can still enjoy these beautiful natural areas and all of the animals and biodiversity that come with them.
Yeah, so these are some of the areas that your organization has been able to protect. And I'm sure, Devon, you can jump in there as well, being the conservationist, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with what Lindsey is saying. We've had a lot of big wins over the past, and we have a lot of knowledge within our organization, and just things that have worked in the past that we can try and use moving forward to try and protect more areas. And it's really great to be part of an organization that has, such a goal to protect these spaces for us and for future Albertans.
Maybe tell us about some of the natural treasures of Alberta.
Yeah, there's so many of them. The Eastern Slopes are one. McClellan Lake is a really special area that maybe Devon, you can talk a little bit about why that place is so special and the work that we're doing up there right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So AWA has a campaign going on right now about McClellan Lake. So McClellan Lake wetland complex is a really important source of water in Alberta, and it's actually up in northern Alberta, northeastern Alberta, about 90 kilometers north of Fort McMurray. And so what's going on there is that Suncor's Fort Hills oil sands project is proposing to expand into McClellan Lake area. And we have a big problem with that because the area is so ecologically important. It's important for a lot of migratory birds. It's super important for just carbon sequestration. We are in a climate crisis right now, so that's incredibly important. So AWA actually had a couple of boreal peatlands experts to review the operational plan for the Fort Hills oil sands expansion. And we published a report that sort of shows a bunch of the concerns about this project and why it's unlikely to be sustainable and to protect the unmined portion of the wetland complex. So we've asked the Alberta Energy Regulator to revoke its approval on the project, and that's currently going through AER's reconsideration process.
Okay, so then Devon, let me ask you this. So I understand that there is some care for watersheds. Can you share a little bit with us about the ideas of both protecting and enriching some of Alberta's creeks and rivers? I know you're kind of going into there. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. So we know that what happens in a watershed is really important and it affects water, so rivers and creeks and things like that. So if our goal is to really protect our water resource, we need to think carefully about what's happening on the landscape within those watersheds. And there are a few concerns that we have, particularly in the eastern slopes, which form headwaters for a lot of our major rivers. Some of those concerns are activities like forestry, coal mining, which we've already talked a little bit about, and also some unsustainable recreation. So these are things that we really need to look at when we're thinking about how to, protect and enrich our water resources. We need to think about those activities. So logging really needs to be done in a sustainable manner. It can't be done in huge quantities that just, take the forest off the landscape and reduce the capability of the land to actually retain water and filter that water that ends up in those rivers. Coal mining, as we've already talked about, is, impacts water just so negatively. It can lead to selenium and other pollutants in the water that affects fish, that affects, irrigation, and of course it affects our drinking water. And then also recreation. A lot of Albertans are getting out there to the eastern slopes to enjoy our wild spaces, which is amazing. But that has to be done sustainably. So we need to make sure that the density of trails that we have is within a threshold where it isn't harming water and it isn't harming species at risk and things like that. And so all of these things require really thoughtful land use planning and just making sure that we're being really thoughtful about what we're doing with the landscape and what we want to see on this landscape in the future. So that's kind of how I would say that we try to protect our watersheds.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And also like the headwaters, like you were talking about, I know some will tell us that the water is originating in Cypress Hills and Milk River in Alberta, make their way actually both north to Hudson's Bay and also south down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. I find that so interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting. We have headwaters, of course, as I mentioned, in the eastern slopes of the Rockies, and as you mentioned as well, in Cypress Hills, and some of that water, like the South Saskatchewan River, flows through the prairies and provides drinking water to so many people, ultimately ending up in the Hudson Bay there. And as well, you mentioned the Milk River there, which flows back into the United States and provides drinking water for people there. So those are vitally important resources that we definitely need to take care of.
Yeah, I would say long-lasting effects too, and it affects a lot of people as well. And of course, here in Alberta, we have some great public land use zones in our region. So maybe talk a little bit about the camping and useful purposes of these public lands. We are getting into that camping season right now, and the time of year when people are out and about more exploring Alberta.
Yeah, we sure are. And yeah, camping is amazing. I do want to say that the lands, we don't need to camp on them or use them for them to be useful. They're actually really useful just the way they are. They're homes to thousands of different kinds of mammals and plants and bird life. And we know right now biodiversity has been in the news a lot. It's something that our governments around the world are looking at as being really important for the continued survival of our species as well. Because when we have areas with lots of biodiversity, it means that they're healthy landscapes. And so we're very lucky that we get to go and play and that we have so many of these landscapes in our province that are very biodiverse and very intact and functional as native landscapes. And they've been stewarded for generations by our First Nations people. And so we recognize the privilege that we have of being able to go out and recreate and find these spaces for peace and recreation and fun and all those wonderful things.
Oh, absolutely. So what are your ladies, what are some of your favorite ways to explore these areas of Alberta? I know we were talking just before the interview, and Lindsey, you were just in Jasper. Devon, you were just in Kananaskis on the long weekend. I was in Waterton, so it sounds like we were all out there kind of enjoying it. What are some of your favorite places to explore?
Yeah, I really love the prairies. They're a little bit underappreciated. Everybody loves the mountains because they're very obvious, right? The big, impressive mountains. But the prairies are just incredible. Floating down a prairie river like the Milk River or the South Saskatchewan, and you get to that hour, we call it the golden hour, just before sunset. And then the sky lights on fire and the grasses are golden. And you can hear the meadowlarks singing and sometimes the nighthawks booming as they're hawking for insects. And the smell of that warmed sage from all day in the sun is sort of just wafting through the air. And those are some of my personal favorite places.
That's so poetic. That's very poetic.
Yeah. But the mountains are super cool too. And my daughter, she's 7 and she likes climbing to the top of mountains. That's what she likes doing. And she's actually doing a fundraiser for the Alberta Wilderness Association this year. She's going to climb 8 summits in our mountains before she turns 8 in September this year. So we're really excited.
Oh my gosh, that is just fantastic. We'll have to do a special feature on her. That sounds amazing. Devon, what about you? Do you have a top 3 list to share with our viewers of spots to explore this summer?
Oh, wow. I'm not sure if I have a top 3, but I will say I grew up in Calgary and, visiting the mountains as a kid, camping and hiking and things like that. So Kananaskis really does feel like home to me. And I really am at home in big forests. There's just something so special and so peaceful and quiet about being in sort of a mountain forest surrounded by trees. So I would say anywhere where there's trees is where I like to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds good. Me too. Love the mountains as well.
Yeah, for the viewers out there, the AWA, if people are they don't know where to go, we offer our Adventures for Wilderness program, which is one of our educational programs. And so we take folks out to special areas. We have one coming up at the beginning of June where we're going out to the Milk River Ridge. We have one coming up later in June going to the Wainwright Dunes. Maybe you didn't know there were sand dunes in Alberta, but there are. And yeah, lots of other places exploring fire lookouts. We have a paddling night coming up next week. Just lots of ways. We have a bird watching course, which is this weekend, which is full because there's so many people who are really excited to learn more about all these spaces. And that's one of our sort of primary motivations is to help other people learn what amazing wild places we have here in Alberta and what they can do to help protect them.
Yeah, if our viewers want to know more about the organization, how can they get in touch with you? Is the best way the website?
Yeah, so we've got the Adventures for Wilderness website is where all those hiking and paddling and outdoor events are, and albertawilderness.ca is where they can find all the information, things like McClellan Lake and all the issues that we're working on, some of the information about just all the amazing natural areas in our province. We also are on social media, so look for us at Alberta Wilderness or Adventures for Wild on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter,
Right.
and
The usual
if people are
suspects.
interested, they can also become members because our organization relies on membership. The more members we have, the stronger our voice is when we talk to industry, when we talk to government, because we have all these people who are agreeing and are supporting our mission.
Great. It looks like we're about out of time here, but thanks so much for joining me today, ladies. Great to talk to you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. That was Lindsey Wallis, the event specialist, and Devon Earl, the conservation specialist of the Alberta Wilderness Association, and they joined me today from Calgary.